Hey, this is Madalyn Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Amazon AMP has finally announced that they will be shuttering the app and they will be closing it down, and it will be no more. This was Amazon's play at social audio, right? And it seemed to have a great deal going for it in that they were going to allow creators to access the Amazon Music library, and they were kind of presenting it as a bit of a play towards creating your own radio show, right? And I don't know, it never really seemed to pick up. It was certainly out there in beta and people were invited. You had to have a code, you have to have an invite. And it never kind of really got beyond that in terms of being rolled out for public access, really. They didn't shout about it very much. I mean, it seemed very difficult to access. And I was kind of thinking a little bit over the weekend about the similarities between Spotify Live and Amazon AMP, and how both of them are plays for social audio from really big companies that haven't actually amounted to anything. We lost Spotify Live already a few months ago. Now Amazon AMP will close at the end of the month. And both of them kind of had a very similar play going for them. You had all of this music. You should have been able to play all the Spotify catalogue they made available to you. You had all the Amazon Music stuff. For anyone in broadcasting, radio, podcasting, we all know what a hassle it is to be able to use the songs that people know and love because of licensing and copyright and all of that legal stuff around it. So these apps and these features within social audio seem to give people that kind of access to content that really we hadn't been able to use legally before. So surely it should have had everything going for it. But no, sadly not. Amazon AMP will close at the end of the month. So it had a few problems along the way. I did create a thread, which I'll refer to again in a minute, but Amazon AMP itself, we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, there'd been a leak from a sort of top Amazon leaders meeting saying there was some real disquiet within Amazon about it. The top leadership had been changed really suddenly. People didn't like it. They didn't really see what direction it was going in. They couldn't really see what its future was. And then weeks later, we hear that they're going to be closing it. The staff actually on the team that launched it in March 2022 was actually cut in half fairly soon after the launch. You know, a lot of that is obviously a result of the different tech cuts that have been happening in various companies. As I say, I put together a thread earlier because I was trying to kind of gather my thoughts around why Spotify and Amazon might not have been able to make this play for social audio work. Morgan has been tweeting furiously off the back of it, and I haven't even managed to read everything that he's put on there yet, but there are some great thoughts there. I'll share the thread with you in just a second, and I can see Morgan is here as a speaker as well, so perhaps we can have a bit of a chat about it. I mean, taking that broader question, Michael and Morgan, thank you so much for joining me, stepping into those shoes of Madalyn's while she's not here. That broader question of why Spotify and Amazon couldn't make it work, what would be your response?
Michael, I think you should go first because being over in the UK, my take on AMP is slightly limited by the fact that it was still restricted to the US. So I've looked at screenshots, I've kept up to date with my US friends who were using it. I've read their release materials, but the rest is secondhand. So maybe you have firsthand knowledge.
Fair enough. Yeah. So I guess some thoughts that are swirling in my head about this is that Amazon, this was one of their very rare plays into creating a bit of a creator economy, for lack of a better term. I mean, you can, as an Amazon influencer, you can submit product videos and people can watch them, and some people go live on Amazon and so on. And other than that, this was about it. And when it came onto the market, what was really remarkable about AMP is how similar it was to another app that's been around for a while called Stationhead. It basically was emulating exactly the same functionality and all the same things you could do, except it was using Amazon's music library instead of either Spotify or Apple Music that people had to be subscribed to be able to use Stationhead. So I don't know, I guess AMP was coming into a market that was already kind of being filled by another app that was doing fairly well on its own. And then it just didn't seem like they wanted to put much behind it as far as promoting it and really making it a big thing. It was, I don't know, maybe it was an experiment, but it didn't pan out for them. So I guess I'll leave it there for now.
Morgan, you've obviously had quite a lot to say on the various points that I had put out there. What, as you say, we didn't really get our hands on it over here, right? And even trying to listen to it was difficult. I mean, I did so via VPN a few times, but finding out what was on there was very difficult. And that's one of the things that I've put in the thread. Like, in the end, if nobody knows what they're looking for or where to find it, how is this thing ever going to happen? And as you've said in one of your responses, surely that's key across the board with all of this social audio stuff and with podcasting as well, with any of this kind of content. Why is everyone finding it so difficult to crack that, do you think?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the deep rooted problems for live in any situation. So, I mean, with I'd probably want to say down the line some more like things about the company, the positioning, community management, Amazon as a whole, all sorts of things like that. But if you just focus on this general problem for social audio, which is when you have something that's live, to be able to recommend to people so that when you open the app, you have a good experience, you need a couple of things in place that are actually very hard to get in place. One is on the supply side. So you need an awful lot of live conversations so that you can, when somebody opens the app, have a good chance of, from that variety, being able to find something that you could recommend to them. A second one there is you've got to work out what on earth that conversation is while it's live. And of course, conversations are long, open-ended, wonderfully winding things, much different from, say, a short video clip. The other side is the demand side. So most of what we consume is on demand. And to make the time or to be at the place where you think, okay, I'm going to set aside this open-ended time. Maybe it's scheduled, that's slightly different. But that constrains just how many people you might be able to reach. So you have a demand constraint and a supply constraint from the very beginning. And when you're doing that, you then have to, in real time live, work out of who on the demand side you can match to things on the supply side. And all of that is actually incredibly difficult. We might feel that it's difficult because we'll hold up a company like TikTok as having this remarkable ability to recommend us on-demand stuff, videos that are asynchronous, right? But when they insert lives into that, very rarely, I think, you swipe up and you see a live and you think, oh, this is a fantastic recommendation. And if TikTok struggle with that, everybody else is going to have real problems.
One of the other points that I'd mentioned was monetization and how any creators on any of these social audio apps seem to be driven there by the thought of how they might sponsor their content, monetize their content in some way. And without that kind of direct access to doing so on either of those platforms, potentially that was a reason why people didn't necessarily explore it further. Do you think that might be another point for kind of users and creators?
Yeah, I think there are a number of aspects to this. So Amazon were really positioning this. Well, firstly, I have to say that Amazon tried to keep their brand out of it. It was, for all intents and purposes, AMP. And we knew it was Amazon, but most people didn't, I think. So I'll just say, when I say Amazon, I really mean AMP here. But they positioned it as a kind of creator platform as part of the creator economy, as Michael said. And when you do that, one of the things that is now kind of table stakes is expected is a form for these creators to monetize. And Amazon, of course, introduced their creator fund. This is a move that we've seen often in social audio. We saw it a lot in 2021. Clubhouse did it. Spaces had the Spark program. Facebook tried to pay creators. This was, a thing to do. But I think this is actually in hindsight, quite a questionable thing to do early on when you're building a product, because effectively you're paying to acquire users and you don't really know why those users are sticking around or are there. Whereas what you want to do early on is get a real feel for whether your product is resonating with users, whether people are there and enjoying it for the product itself. So that's one of the reasons why I think that this is probably not a great idea. The other one is a matter of community. I think Clubhouse people would recognize this, and Spaces people also would, that when you're selecting a smaller group of creators and you're paying them in the early stages to produce for your platform, you have a lot of other people who are there creating, and they feel slightly, hard done by. They feel like they too should be looked after in some sense. And it can be, for a product that is often group-based, it can create division in a community. And I think that community aspect is often not thought about well when companies are approaching this as a creator platform, thinking about creator programs. So I don't a lot more to say there, but does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think also they tried to draw on fan-based communities, didn't they, by drawing in celebrities and well-known names. So, I mean, Amazon AMP, pretty much the only name I've ever seen linked with AMP is Nicki Minaj, and clearly her radio show is, they've had lots of fans and posts and things on X about, where are we going to listen to Nicki Minaj now? So she obviously drew in a lot of people, but I think that was maybe one of their ways of trying to draw ready-made communities via music fans over to discover what was there and find out more kind of about it. Michael, what did you want to say?
Well, my thoughts, you used the word radio show, which I think is really, really important to bring up here, because if any platform was really going to have a chance to create something that was really great for creators to monetize, it was AMP and even Stationhead, because so many people have had the dream of running their own radio show, like being the DJ, and they play the music, they spin the tracks, and so AMP and Stationhead even gave people the ability to do this, and AMP couldn't capitalize on it to make it a business that they could sustain. Stationhead keeps going. You can give tips to people over there. I'm not exactly sure how the monetization works, but there is stuff built into that over there. So I gotta say, we've got to think of these platforms as a little bit different from like Clubhouse and X Spaces and so on, because it really was designed from the beginning to be a creator platform, not so much community building or friendship building. And it's still, AMP has not gone anywhere and they're closing it down. So I think that's interesting.
Yes, definitely. No, somebody asked me, they said, look, surely radio is still a thing. It has a wide user base. What is going to be the digital version of that? There must be a route to that. And it seemed that Amazon, thing I appreciated by the attempt for AMP is just how narrowly focused it was, that it wasn't trying to be all things to all people. It wasn't like, oh, you can do talking, but you can also do shows, and also we have this music aspect. It was, look, you turn up and you play your records, and maybe you do a bit of talking in between, and that's really it. That music focus, and specifically the radio positioning, I thought set it up for, okay, maybe this is interesting, this could work. So we're still left with the question of why that didn't work, and whether there still is a way to get something that looks like radio in a more interactive digital form.
Yeah, and you're totally right about drawing on all those people that are wannabe radio stars, right? Why do you think I've got a roadcaster in front of me? I mean, I worked at a radio station for many years, and the minute I came away from it, I was like, how can I try and emulate that feeling and be involved in that kind of content again? Yeah, so there's...
Exactly, Suze. And the thing is, like, you've been doing this. You have it, and you can run a great space here and a podcast and so on. And maybe people are realizing that to really be a good DJ and run a proper musical radio show, it takes a lot more than just showing up and playing music, and so maybe that plays a factor in it as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think sometimes you think, oh, it's just audio. I've not got to sort out the backdrop. I've not got to think about the video of it. I'm not thinking about filters and lighting and all of that kind of thing. But actually, when all you have got to rely on is the audio and what comes out of your mouth to engage people, and all you've got is their ears and their minds to, that's you're working within the theatre of the mind, right? You've got to say things that keep people listening and keep people interested in what's going on. That is, that is a skill. It's not necessarily one I've got, but it is a skill, and it's one I'd like to hone and build, which is why we do this. And yeah, maybe it's not just as easy as plugging in the microphone and just off you go. I mean, just basing it on all things audio, me and Madalyn build up the content throughout the week. Sometimes we drop some stuff, sometimes we bring some stuff in, sometimes we have great ideas a couple of hours before we go live, like this thread that appeared as a post earlier today from me, and you suddenly think, oh, that's changed everything about what I thought tonight's show was going to be about. But that's the other thing, this whole kind of live real-time reaction. And that is actually a lot of where social audio has found a lot of listeners, is in reacting to real-time stuff. And in that sense, yes, it is very much like live radio, like that 24-hour station that you can, tune into. So, yeah, it's a shame to see it going. But I guess once staff get cut from these projects, it is always writing on the wall, really, unless unless it's making them loads of money or it's really drawing them into a direction that the company appears to be going in. I guess the writing was on the wall for them, but it is sad to see it go.
Right, yeah, and that's some of the broader thing. If we're not thinking about the product itself or social audio in general or something like that, the other thing is what we have is these large companies who have deep pockets, who I think on the back of the pandemic were looking for a thing that could open up new markets for them, and they had the money to put into it. So, but these things were never core to their business. And when times got tough, so there was a big crunch in funding. I mean, Amazon is obviously doing pretty well in general, but Alexa business, which I think this was hooked up to, has been struggling for years. They've lost billions of dollars. And if a product is not showing traction fairly early for them, when the cost cutters come round, these things are just obvious targets. So I think that's another thing, that social audio is actually much more vulnerable because many of the companies that tried to do it in the last few years, it was always treated as a feature and not a product, which is a shame here because Amazon and Spotify launched these as separate products, not features. So depending on which way you want to go on that, but just the thought that they didn't have enough time to show traction, and these companies were not invested in them enough to work out how to get product market fit. And then they were cut.
Which makes you think it really was that knee-jerk reaction to where they could see the hype during the pandemic, and almost like a desperation to get involved in the thing where all the people were all of a sudden. I mean, I guess, when lockdowns started and that, no one had any idea how long all of that might go on for. So even if they had a glimmer of doing something with audio or something like social audio in the future, seeing everybody flock to Clubhouse and people start to speak on spaces here on Twitter on an established platform, potentially that, they haven't thought it through in business terms. It is literally one of those, this is where everybody is and it's the zeitgeist moment. We've got to jump on this bandwagon and push out what we haven't completely thought through yet. I don't know. Do companies really do that? I don't know. I've never been in a company that's got all that money that might be able to just spin something up and push it out, I suppose.
The other thought that I had about this was, AMP was tied to Amazon Music, and Amazon Music is really not a big player in the music market. Spotify and Apple really are. And so, in some ways I could see where Apple or Amazon just wasn't seeing the return on investment. They weren't getting the tracks played to be able to, to get all the financial things that they want to accomplish. Maybe it just didn't line up so that it was profitable and worth their while to keep the service going.
Yes. So, Suze, I think there is an element of, oh, look, this is a thing that we can jump on. But I also think that there's just very sensible reasons for each of these companies to do it in their own way. So you can see Amazon wanted something that could fit in with an install base of Alexa devices that could get people doing more with their Alexa devices than just setting a timer. So higher value use of Alexa, which was a long-standing business issue for them. But also the music side, you said, Michael, that Amazon itself is a fairly staid, boring company. And if you looked at AMP, the fact that they didn't include the Amazon brand and that the design of it, the marketing of it was so different, so bright and colorful and youth focused. Amazon had a need to appeal to younger customers for various of their businesses. So it also served that. So it makes a lot of sense that Amazon got involved. It wasn't just jumping on a bandwagon, but also it didn't achieve those specific things that they needed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still unsure that Amazon really understand any direction of what they've really headed for with Alexa at all whatsoever, having worked alongside kind of that voice industry for a few years. Like you've said, I was hoping that this might bring Alexa into it in some way. I want to bring Cyndilu in. I think you actually did some creation over on AMP, Cyndilu. Is that right?
I tried to. Well, I did put the list together. And I was all ready to start, and I went go live, and it said, wait for your first listener to arrive. That was it. I could do nothing until my first listener arrived. And since I was able to do a space, whatever it is a show, because I have an American account, but I live in New Zealand, so my time zone is different than the people in America. So of course nobody was up. So I had no listeners. So there, thus ended the show.
Oh, it stopped before it started. And yet you were all ready to go.
That's why I say I tried.
Had you kind of built up what music you were what was your hope for it? You'd built up a music playlist you were going to go through. Had you sort of planned around what you might say and the structure of it or anything like that? Or was it just going to be on the hoof, whoever joined, see what happened?
I was actually doing an experimental show. I was going to do experimental show of all of the different versions of Amazing Grace and just talk about the different artists afterwards and, how it felt or what that person did. Wow.
I mean, I want to listen to that show, right? This is the thing. Where else do we go for that content? Where else can we hear that? What an amazing idea. And what a shame that you were thwarted before it even really got off the ground. So the idea was that once the show had some listeners to it, you'd have been able to press the button and play the songs. But until then, it wasn't allowing you to do that.
Yep. So that was my one and only experience. I didn't go back to try that again. I was like, okay, never mind.
Yeah, and I
So
think that they
changed
fixed
it.
that.
Yeah,
I think
they
they
probably
did, but they lost people at that point. I mean, it was too late.
Well, this is the thing. If you're trying something new, you don't want to go to all that hassle of putting together a playlist, finding the moment to do it, hitting the button and then nothing. And, that does drive people away. And someone, Cyndilu's experienced at social audio and will have known what she was going to do and everything else. But someone who might have thought, oh, this looks like a good thing. This is my first try out at this. I can use some music, who then doesn't get to even open their mouth on the mic and be heard by anybody at all, they're not going to try again, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, probably not.
A big thank you to our sponsors, Zealous.
I love Zealous. This has been one of the coolest tools that we've come across, and so we just had to make them a sponsor. If you're like us and you're doing spaces, maybe even podcasts, this tool makes it so easy to repurpose the content so you can use it like audiograms. Suze, I love how you keep creating these awesome audiograms after our space ends, and it's such a great way to keep the conversation going, take little snippets and put it out there.
We've wanted to create audiograms for all the different episodes that we've done over the last 2 years, and it just takes up more time. But Zealous has made it really straightforward. And actually this week, my new thing that I checked out with them is their new AI tools. So actually what they're testing out, it's in beta over there at the moment, but you can ask it to suggest where chapter headings should go within your audio, and also to create things like show notes and blog posts from the transcript of your audio, which it can create for you, all of which is super useful.
Yeah, go check it out at allthingsaudioPodcast.com/zealous. They have a free trial. Highly recommend it. We both did the free trial, Suze and I, and we fell in love with it.
I do want to ask Michael a little bit about Clubhouse and switch over to that topic.
Oh, all three of us can talk about that. So
So it's about a month now since Clubhouse went from live rooms over to this chats format. How's it going? And what's the feeling over there at the minute?
It's going okay. I think the dust is settling and people are beginning to figure out kind of what to do with these asynchronous chats where we can start a chat and then people can reply as they will in 30-second segments. And it just creates this sort of long timeline of audio clips of people sharing their thoughts, talking back and forth with each other. There's been conversations about whether these are conversations. There's been a lot of belly aching from people who want to be more of a creator on Clubhouse, and a lot of what they were doing was sort of shut down by this big change because that's not what the Clubhouse co-founders were wanting to go for. So, some people left. A lot of people have come back. Some people said they were going to leave, and they haven't. They're still sticking around. Some people have tried to move a bunch of their fans and friends over to other platforms. I don't know how successful that's been because I haven't tried it, but we're still figuring it out. And Clubhouse has admitted that it was a very sort of beta product that they were rolling out, and they wanted our feedback on things. They are adding features and tweaking things to try to make it a better experience for people and really to get people talking to each other as easily as possible in various ways. So that is what Clubhouse is really focused on, is getting people talking to each other, connecting people as friends, and spreading friendship throughout the world. So I think it's going well. I actually quite like the chats. I think in a lot of ways, they're way more convenient than live rooms. And the things that we miss from the live rooms aren't huge deals. Yes, there are pros and cons to each. But I think, with a chat, asynchronously, you can get about maybe 90% of the way to what sort of conversation you can have in a live room asynchronously. So, yeah, we're still figuring it out as we go along.
So what are the things that they've updated so far since the launch then? Have they kind of tidied up any of the bugs people had found or introduced anything that's brand new?
Yeah, there are some bugs that have been squashed, others that pop up along the way. Little things like, when you're in an asynchronous chat, adding an icon to the little bubble when somebody's speaking so that you can, from just tapping on that little plus sign or the message button, you can add them as a friend or start a private chat with them in what they call the voice message section. So that's one of many sort of things that is just they're trying to make it as low a lift as possible to connect with other people and get talking to them and build those relationships. So, and Morgan and Cyndilu, I'll pass it along to you if there's any other notable sort of features they've added in this last month that you can think of.
Yeah,
Morgan's wearing one.
I'm wearing one, which we were all very excited. This is a new icon we got last week, which was the ability to hide chats you're not interested in. So there's still some, this is an example of one of those things that they obviously have to have, and they didn't have ready in time for the launch. So we've been running around making sure our hallways have the things that we're interested in. Other things that I have a feeling that there is something new cooking that we haven't seen yet, which is going to be interesting, but I can't say any more about that. And it feels like we're at the stage where there's quite a lot of A/B testing going on. So there'll be things that Michael has shown in terms of new UI that I'm not seeing yet. And then some people are getting one kind of hallway and some others are getting a different kind. And this is the point where they're working out how to tune things like personalized recommendations for the hallway and what causes somebody to send someone a private message or what causes someone to start or reply to a chat. And they're looking at tuning that to get obviously more of it going on. So it's still like we're working out how to make this thing sing, and it's not really ready for a broader release, I think. But it's kind of I don't know, it's still fun. I think in the base case, what I found it doing for me is really achieving two things that I think it's setting out for, that I'm feeling more like in contact with people that matter to me throughout the day rather than just turning up in one room. And the other one is meeting new people. So that is happening in chats. And I met somebody a couple of days back, actually. I think it was through a friend of Michael's who was making chats. And this person lives nearby, being in the UK, and they're interested in similar
I'm pretty
things.
sure I know who you're talking about.
Right.
I have not spoken to this person directly yet.
Really interesting.
I would consider this person a friend, but we have not been in a live room. We have not had a discussion one-on-one live with each other. But there's this.
Yeah, so not only is this person someone I've met through chats, this person is new to Clubhouse. They came on 3 weeks ago, and before that they were using Swell, which is another like asynchronous voice note. So this is a medium that's really familiar with them, and they really like the Clubhouse implementation of it. And we haven't talked in a live room yet, but we are sending each other private messages and getting to know each other right now, basically.
And are you still hosting live? I was going to say the lounge because that's what we had before over there. But are you still hosting like anything that's a live room over there of any sort, whether that's, for a smaller group of people or a more public thing?
Yes, those are still happening. So I don't want to make this sound like it's just about asynchronous things. Maybe Cyndilu can say more about that. But one of the things that I think is underappreciated at the moment is it used to be you'd open Clubhouse and you'd see a whole lot of things, many of which you weren't interested in. And often some of them you might be horrified by, not the kind of thing you wanted to see. And that's all gone now. When I open it, I might see less live rooms, but the ones I do are ones with people I know and usually topics I'm interested in. So those are still going on. And I would say the conversations that happen in them are much better because they have that sort of closer connection with the people there. But I don't know. Cyndilu, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I am definitely seeing live rooms continuing. I'm continuing mine. I do 4 to 5 live rooms a week still. Some of them are well attended, some of them aren't. I also attend probably 10 live rooms a week, 3 of which are centered around a ukulele, just for disclosure. I am taking lessons on Clubhouse still, and we have a live room to do that. And then we have 2 performance ones that I go to. So, yeah, there's still um, a lot of communities that are there doing their thing. And the beat that they kind of skipped was, how do I start a live? Once they got to the point where they knew how to start their lives, they were happy and going along and aren't really seeing a difference. And then there's other people who are super frustrated because their audiences have not found them. And I'm not sure what makes the difference and how that's happening for people or not for people.
Well, there is an interesting dynamic going on with Clubhouse now. When they launched 2.0, they changed the way that house rooms work. Previously, it was clubs, then houses, and you could open up a public room that was underneath a house. So, say it was All Things Audio House. If we were in there having an open room with the house, people could come into the room, they could join the house from the room, and it was really a very sort of public kind of thing. Now, that has changed quite a bit. Instead of having the window shades open and the front door wide open, the window shades are closed and the door is generally closed, but people often will go out to the town square and go, "Hey, come knock on our door and come on into the house for our private conversations now." So people who have been running house rooms are finding, I think, that they're getting a smaller audience in those rooms, but the conversations they're having may be a higher quality because the only people who can see them and join them are the people who made the decision to join the house and be able to see the room in the first place. Along with that, the replays for those rooms are no longer accessible to the public. So if we were to have an All Things Audio house, only the people who are members of that house would have access to listen to those replays. So I'm not sure what I think about that, but it's made for a new interesting dynamic in the way people promote their houses. using chats to promote their houses or rooms that are coming up. It's really, really interesting.
And then so winding back to what Morgan said initially, and just for the podcast, Morgan's changed his profile picture today to, I think it's a closed eyelid icon that's appeared over on the Clubhouse app to be able to hide things that you don't want to see. So is that then this recommendations, you're saying it's really being filtered down into things that you are really interested in. Do you feel like that's partly because you're over there using it quite a lot, so it's learning more about your habits and topics and things from what you're interested in and spending time engaging with, but also this kind of being able to hide things is giving it another data point, and therefore you are being served that general content that is far more personalised to your own interests? Do you feel like that's feeding into that discoverability channel?
I would say it's still very early days here. So all of these recommendations, and this goes right back to the beginning of our conversation today, is look, recommending live is really hard. And now what they're going to be using is all the signal and data they will have with your interaction with chats. And that's much easier because there's a lot more of them. They stick around, and you can determine that you're very used to on, for example, TikTok. Which segments do you skip? Do you listen to the first message of a chat and then keep going? How many seconds into a segment do you listen to? All of that can be used. But it's going to take some time, I think, to work out and to have enough data there to really drive high quality recommendations. So the Clubhouse team themselves have called this version, only 4 weeks into this, is, in quotes, quick and dirty heuristics. So hiding is really important here because the personalized recommendations are not yet always great. So I'm seeing improvements here, and it can work out which things that I'm listening to most of, or which things I've replied to several times, or which things I've subscribed to. And it is showing those more often or more prominently. But I do think that this is early days. So the promise is there for this, but it's also going to take some working out.
Absolutely. So it still feels like they're kind of experimenting with different things and it's not settled. Would that be right? Is it still a little bit, does it still feel a bit unsettled over there, even though you are finding, enjoyment in the chats and finding new friends and new people, which is, amazing and totally what the founders were after when they relaunched it in this way? Is there still just sort of this air of, it feels a bit like a beta app in a way, because there's still things that might come and go or disappear or be done a different way the next time I open the app?
In some senses, yes. I think that this is still I think internally it's joked that this is not Clubhouse 2.0, it's Clubhouse 1.9. So there's still some more things that they know that they want to be in place before this is ready. One of those is, for example, it's quite hard at the moment to see when your friends are online. And that's going to come back in the next week or two. So there are various little bits that we know need to be in place. On the other hand, I think it feels a bit different to how it did in the last year, because this is now a company that has a very clear idea of what they want to do, and they're much more, and it seems to be consistent in that. So I don't feel like this is a case where things might disappear overnight or they might veer in a different direction. But that said, it still feels like a slightly experimental learning phase right now for the direction that they are going in.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much to all three of you for adding your thoughts and comments there on Clubhouse. I've not had time this week to go back over. I do love the chats for all the reasons that you've mentioned. The asynchronous thing really works for me. I enjoy getting involved with them. I've met some really great people already through being in the few chats that I've been in. And yeah, it is an exciting and different way of using social audio. So it'll be interesting to see where it heads in the world of social audio and where it might be 12 months from now. So thank you very much for adding your thoughts. I just want to mention a bit of podcasting news, and then I'll open the mics before we close out the space. So if anyone does have any comments to make about Amazon AMP, perhaps you've presented something over there successfully, or perhaps you'll miss it, or perhaps you didn't even know it was a thing, or anything around Clubhouse and their 2.0 000952221 iteration of whatever it is they're working on right now, then please do request the mic and we'll come to you shortly. The news for podcasting in the UK today is that finally podcasts are being added to the YouTube Music app. Now, this is pretty epic for us in the UK because we've been waiting for this, or I've been waiting for this for quite some time. There's been an awful lot of talk and not a lot of action when it's come to podcasting and YouTube. And certainly for us over in the UK, we've been waiting around for it. But finally, got word yesterday that this was happening. Lots of people I could see posting in different places on social saying it was happening yesterday. It wasn't happening for me. There was a lot of refreshing of the app and not a lot of podcast news going on there. And then this morning when I went into the app, it was there. So my first impressions of it are that it's got a really nice clean UI to it. It's got a nice audio or video toggle, which I wasn't expecting, but really easy and really obvious right there. So you can literally switch the video off if you want to, and, you know, just have it as a player. The absolute key to it is the lock screen listening, which, you know, if anyone's tried to listen to anything over on YouTube, you'll know that the minute your phone screen goes black, it just kills it for you. So that, you know, it's great to be able to have that feature. I have to say, we've spoken a little bit about discoverability and recommendations here in terms of social audio today, but the recommendations on the YouTube Music app for the moment of podcasts seem completely broken. And I wouldn't be surprised if someone hasn't, you know, fit A to B somewhere along in the back end. I think having searched for the All Things Audio podcast, which was the first thing that I did, my recommendations were all Sports Bro podcasts, which I can quite categorically say I have never searched for on Google or YouTube. So I'm not quite sure why they were throwing those at me. So it'll be interesting to see when they actually zip that all up properly. You know, I've seen major publishers on LinkedIn saying this is really disruptive. This is going to make huge waves and a huge difference to podcasting. I think there are still lots of people trying to work out where video fits with podcasting, creators and listeners trying to work out the definition of a podcast. And I had a conversation with someone that's quite interesting the other day around the fact that really any of those young YouTube users at the moment who have been listening to podcasts will just accept that a podcast is video or audio, right? I think it's only the generation that remembers the iPod and remembers the kind of foundations of those audio files being distributed via Apple Podcasts that will really relate that pod with iPod and with audio. So I think that's another kind of interesting thing to watch. But yeah, so podcasts have arrived on the YouTube Music app in the UK, and I'm looking forward to exploring that further over the coming days and weeks.
Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.